I was sitting on a beach with my husband. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining, it was warm. We were sitting on a piece of driftwood and my husband put his arm around me and we were looking out at the water and I was crying, like heaving, ugly crying. And I couldn't stop. And my husband was terrified because he thought he'd done something. And I couldn't even tell him that he hadn't because I didn't really know what was going on with me. Now I know what you're thinking, menopause. But it wasn't that. Although, anyway, it wasn't that. I was having a rock bottom moment. And it wasn't because of an addiction, and it wasn't because I'd done something unforgivable. In fact, what I had done was something that most people do. I was having this moment because I was so tired and so fed up with sticking it out in a job that I hated because I thought it was the responsible thing to do. Now clearly, I'd stuck it out way too long. But I thought, this is the real world. I'm an adult, right? Work is kind of miserable. And I have to go there to make the money, to pay the bills, to have the quote-unquote good life outside of work. And I was a senior manager at a Fortune 500 company. So yeah, my life was going to be a little bit miserable. But I'm not talking about the once in a while bad day kind of miserable. I'm talking about when the bad days become the rule versus the exception. A lot of people will say things like, I don't live to work, I work to live, or I'm a weekend warrior. And I have said both of those things. But what I realized is those concepts don't make any sense because you cannot separate work from life. You cannot compartmentalize work days and non-work days. So the lesson that I really learned is that in order to be happy in life, you have to be happy at work. Not really a big aha. It's sort of like logical. I think everybody in this room would agree with that idea, that premise. The challenge becomes when you have to execute against that. That's when all the excuses start. That's when it gets really sticky. And I know all the excuses because I've used them all. I can't afford to make a change right now. I don't have time to make a change right now. I don't know what I want. I don't know what's going to make me happy. I don't have a passion. The thing is, career happiness is not running off and quitting everything and becoming a yoga instructor because you love going to yoga class. I promise you, running off and changing your life like that, turning everything upside down, is not the key to your career happiness. Because career happiness is not a destination. It's not a specific job. It's not a certain amount of money. It's not something that you are ticking off your to-do list. That day on that beach, I decided I never wanted to feel that way again. And I never wanted anyone to have to go through that feeling. So I decided that I wanted to help people find their career happiness, and I quit my corporate job, and I became a career coach, and I help people find their career happiness. And a lot of the time, people will come to me and they'll think that they need to start over, that they need to, start with a clean slate in order to find their happiness. But that's not always the case. So if you are looking to find your career happiness, I'm going to give you the secret right now. Fortunately, it's not very sexy, okay? The secret of career happiness is figuring out what makes you tick and then aligning your career to that a little bit every day. So those three things: know what makes you tick, decide what parts of that you want to align to your career, and then just make small moves every day So in order to illustrate this, what I put together is this very simple career happiness model. It's something that I use with my clients all the time. And in the center is you, right? What makes you tick? And a lot of people have talked about that today. Knowing who you are and what makes you tick is at the center. When it comes to your career, a couple of the things that we explore are first your strengths. So again, mentioned today, when you're digging into your strengths, there's a few things that you're looking at. Number one, what are you good at? And as we heard this morning, ask your friends, do some assessments, what are you good at? But it's also about what you love doing, what makes you feel strong. And I'm just talking about the small everyday things. I'm not talking about these overwhelming passions, just small everyday things. Grocery shopping, being healthy, organizing meetings, whatever it is that you love doing, makes you feel strong, combined with what you love doing is where you really need to find your strengths. And then it's about your values. Your values are the principles or the guideposts for how you live your life. It creates this territory. And whenever I say to people, find your values, you're like, I don't know, it's a big question. I don't know what my values are. So I'm going to give you 2 pieces of advice to help you find your values. The first one is, you can't get it wrong. They're your values. You're not going to laminate them. You can change them whenever you want. Just start picking some, okay? And the second piece of advice is, ask yourself this question. If you want to find your values, here's a question you can ask yourself to help find them. When you're feeling upset, what value do you think is being stomped on? Okay, what value do you think is being stomped on? So as an example, let's say someone doesn't do something that they say they're going to do for you, and that makes you really upset. What value is being stomped on? For some people, it could be integrity. I expect people to do what they say they're going to do. That's really important to me. For some people, it could be trust. You've broken the trust. I don't know how to connect with you anymore. That's really important to me. Whatever it is for you, that's the right answer. There was another great example this morning about mistakes. Let's say you're in an environment where you don't feel like you can make a mistake. And believe me, in the corporate world, that happens all the time. So let's say that makes you upset. What value is being challenged or being stomped on for you? Is it, freedom? Free to be yourself, your authentic self? Is it, I need to be supported and nurtured? Or is it, for instance, say, the ability to learn is being stomped on, growth is being stomped on? That's how you find your values, when you're feeling those really strong emotions. So when you're doing something that has the strong emotions, ask yourself why you're feeling that way, what is being stomped on. So when you have your strengths and you have your values, you're going to get a really good idea of what makes you tick. And then when you have that, you can start to, I'll move to this slide, okay. You can start to ask yourself, okay, what do I want to take from that and put it into my career? And when I ask people that question, they think, oh, job, it's about the job, right? And the job is important because it's what you need to be trained to do. It's also what you need to prove that you can do if you're going to go to a job interview. But when it comes to career happiness, it's really only one piece of the equation. And working with my clients, we've come up with 8 categories that really impact your career happiness as part of your life. And a lot of people will say, 8 categories, that's a lot of categories. But it's not really. Think about it in the context of buying a house. Okay, when you go and buy a house, the house itself is important, right? So how big is this house? How many bedrooms does it have? Does it have a garage? But it goes well beyond the house itself. What neighborhood is this house in? What's my commute to work? How close is it to the things I do in my life? My coffee shop, where I pray, my family. Is it a fixer-upper? How much does this house cost? Is this my forever house or my interim house? Is it a good investment, this house? So how much, did I say cost? Yeah, how much does this house cost? So these are all the things that go into buying a house, and I bet that you would trade square footage and a garage for some of the other things on this list. It's the same work that you do when you go to buy a car. You would do this kind of work for a house. You would do this kind of work for when you buy a car. You might even do this kind of work, when you're going to go on a big vacation. When it comes to spending the money, we do our homework. When it comes to making the money, we don't. And I really encourage everyone to do that because we spend more than a third of our adult life at work. So it has a huge impact on the overall quality of our life. So in order to do this, one of the things that I encourage people to do, very easy, is to go through each of these categories and ask yourself the same question. Based on what makes me tick, what's my ideal situation? And describe it in any way you want. So if we took people, for instance, what kind of people do I want to work with? Large groups of people, not that many people, no people? What are their values? What are they like? What's their energy? What's my boss like? What's my ideal boss? Do I want reports? How many people do I want reporting to me? Do I like that sort of thing? Those are, just describe it in detail and go around the wheel and describe it. And then you're going to have this huge long list of things. And then just like a house, you got to choose your trade-offs. What are your top 5 to 10 deal breakers in terms of what you absolutely need for the environment that's ideal for you? And then when you have what makes you tick and you have your deal breakers, the next step is just taking small moves every day. That's it. Small moves every day. Some people want to be 100% clear about what they want and 100% certain on the way to get there, the way to get it, before they'll make any moves on their career. When it comes to our careers, we just want everything tied up with a nice little bow before we do anything. It's so different from the rest of our lives. But I encourage you to start to think about how you can take small moves versus big moves. Because that strategy of wanting to be 100% sure is a strategy that's going to keep you stuck. I know that because that's the strategy that I use. That's the strategy that so many of my clients come to me with. Instead, think about this. Think about the idea that clarity, clearness, certainty comes from momentum. You have to do stuff in order to be clear and confident about what to do next. A couple weeks ago, I was in my home office. I'm working on this speech today, and my husband is in the other room, and he's watching The Martian with Matt Damon. He's stuck on Mars. He's got to get off Mars. Spoiler alert, he makes it off the the planet. And at the end of the movie, he's in this room full of aspiring astronauts, and he's talking about how he survived on Mars. And he said, there's no checklist for surviving on Mars. Every time a problem came up, I just had to figure out how to solve it. And then I'd do the same thing the next day. And then when another opportunity came up, I'd go, okay, how can I leverage that opportunity? And then he just kept doing that until he got off the planet, right? And that's what it's about. Use this model, define your territory, and then just solve it one problem at a time, take it one opportunity at a time. And 6 months from now, you're going to be so much happier. You're going to be on the path that you want to be on. You're going to be happier. Everyone around you in your life is going to be happier because that's how it works. That's how you impact those people. And anybody can do this work. It doesn't have to cost you anything. It doesn't have to take up all your time. You can go at your own pace. And you don't have to wait until you are as far gone as I was on that beach that day. If you are just starting to feel out of alignment with your work, if you are just starting to see the impact on yourself and on your family, then take the time. It might mean that your values are changing. They change all the time, when we have kids, when we buy a house, when we start to have a mortgage, all those things, there's all these life stages. It might just mean that your values are changing. So stop, take a look, reevaluate what's going on with you. Because we all have one life. And your life deserves a career that you love. Thank you.